And I want to spend some time on recognizing what a pickle the American left is in. The American left is in, I call this Biden's basement bunker or something like, I gave it that kind of title, messages from news from Biden's basement bunker. But I really want to talk about what it is exactly that the Democrats are facing in these 2020 elections. And it's really important to understand this because there's a lot of talk. There's polling that was showing Biden is up by however many ridiculous number of points. Biden way up, and Trump's behind the eight ball, and the media is just all ready to declare a Biden victory. Even before the election starts, with a lot of pieces that I want to put in place about this. And it's not just because I want the 2020 elections to come out in favor of Donald Trump, which of course I do, but I really want Americans thinking about, my listeners thinking about the position that the Democrat Party is in and how they got here and how they're trying to get out of it. So let me start, first of all, with the array of candidates the Democrat Party had running in the 2020 presidential primary cycle. When you look at I think it was 17 people, all of the Democrats in this country who kind of are, molding and shaping the Democrat Party's agenda and their path forward and who they're going to be and who they appeal to, those people did not want an old white guy to win. They did not want to have Joe Biden. He was about the last choice of the last choice for the radical element of the Democrat Party. And when I say the radical element, the Democrat Party functions in America by, as I've said in the show many times, by making silos of people. So they have, you're assigned a silo, a hyphenated definition by your race, your gender, your ethnicity, and that's all they care about. And so you're a woman, you should vote for Democrats. You're a Black American, you should vote for Democrats. You're Hispanic, that is the way they think. And they don't like old white guys, and especially the young voters in the Democrat Party do not like old white guys. They did not want that. They had an array of people. They were just desperately hoping the Democrat primary voters would come up with one of those type people to win the primary. They so hoped they had, for example, Kamala Harris. They thought that's who I thought would win the primary. She is very pretty. She's African American. She's well educated. She's accomplished. She has government service under her belt. She's been a prosecutor and she's been a United States senator. I thought that would be the dream ticket for a lot of Democrats, but she got nowhere, could not even get herself mostly out of single digits in terms of her popularity. And she was about the best one of the lot. I mean, there were a whole bunch of them. You had Elizabeth Warren. The Democrats would love to be the ones that put a first woman president, but they had Elizabeth Warren, and she's as communist as Bernie. I mean, she's a Bernie Sanders. She's a female version of Bernie Sanders. And I also thought she would get traction. I really did. I think she's very articulate. She's been in the Senate for like 100 years or something. She's very able, and she had problems with voters' perception of her in terms of her integrity because she pretended she was Native American for 20 or 30 years and got quite a bit of headway in her life and income and jobs and all that. But, she still ended up being not the one who the voters could get behind. Bernie Sanders, probably the one that the vast majority of millennials, young voters, the voters that the Democrats count on, they like him, even though he's an old white guy, because he has radical leftist views. He's a communist, and he's settling for calling himself a Democrat socialist. He's a communist. He runs on communist policies. I'm getting to the point. The Democrats had a wide array of choices. The last one they wanted to win was Joe Biden. The last. Compounded with that, Biden is failing mentally. Not a little tiny bit. Dan Bongino was out with a story this week saying inside sources say that Biden is declining so rapidly, the party's really, really in a scramble trying to figure out who they can put in Biden's place. Because if you watch news at all, I never run these clips making fun of people's mental decline. I mean, it's obvious if you ever listen to him for 5 minutes, he can't remember what state he's in, who he's talking to, what he's running for. He closes out he ignores or shuts down many questions in the very, very few media interviews he does take he shuts down questions with like, I don't really have time to talk about that, or you guys already know about that, so I don't really have to do that. He couldn't keep track of the words of the Declaration of Independence, the opening of the Declaration of Independence. So he's, he's very, 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 very confused. But he's their choice. So here they are. He's hiding out in the basement in his home in Delaware, trying to avoid any connection with the American people, trying to avoid any, just having to even deal with the media, because every time he has a media interview of any kind, he forgets what he's talking about. He forgets what day it is. He can't keep track of the topic. He gets lost in a sentence. He's talking about something, and then he has a string of words that are just incoherent. And then he kind of stares at the camera. And if his wife happens to be there to rescue him, she goes, okay, good job, Joe, thanks. I mean, this is the candidate they are stuck with. And the Democrats cannot believe this. I said for months that they were going to have to end up just replacing him, finding a reason to say, hey, turns out Joe can't run after all. But we're getting pretty close, because the Democrat convention's coming right up. And so the Democrat convention coming up, and now you have the Democrat Party trying to decide. And I'm I do smile a lot about thinking like being a fly on the wall inside these meetings, inside the Democrat Party. I think what they've decided to do is keep him on the ballot. He's their candidate. They could be concerned. They would, turn people off or cause alarm by sticking somebody else in. But he's on the ballot, and he's incapable of the job, cannot handle the job. And everyone who knows him knows it. All the media knows it. Everyone knows it. But he's the one who won. And I want to spend a moment talking about why he won. Biden won the primary. And this should make you feel good about America. Biden won the primary because even in the Democrat Party, the leadership filled with radical socialist Marxists, the Democrat Party platform is a straight out happy Marxist platform. That's what the Democrat leadership is. But the Democrat voters, the wide swath of voters in this country who voted Democrat for, their entire lives, because their mother voted Democrat, because they still think the Democrats are the ones who defend the little guy, whatever the reasons are, the Democrat voters in this country took one look at the radicals who ran for president, and they chose Biden because they were under the delusion that Biden was kind of more mainstream. He's a familiar face. He was Barack Obama's vice president. If he never opened his mouth, you could argue he looks presidential. He kind of stands there looking dignified, silver-haired. He even has a pretty good ability to look pretty serious and earnest. And so I think he won the primary largely on the assumption that he's not a crazy radical Marxist. So the Democrat voters in this country don't want a crazy radical Marxist. That's why they picked Biden. What is the job of President Trump and the Republicans from now until November is to help the American people understand that Biden is exactly what all the other candidates were. He actually also is a crazy radical Democrat. He's a crazy radical Marxist. Biden and his team have met with Bernie Sanders and his team. They are right on board with the Green New Deal, with the radical housing programs, the housing decisions, zoning run from Washington. So Washington's going to start telling people where you have to live, what kind of housing is going to come into your neighborhood, where you're going to have low-income housing put. This is Washington's going to orchestrate forced economic, racial, national origin integration. No more, lovely enclaves for the wealthy. They're going to run everything from Washington. And that was a pipe dream of Obama, a radical pipe dream for Bernie Sanders, and it's a pipe dream for Biden. So the Republicans have a job, and I'm sure they'll do it to make sure America understands Biden is just as radical as all the rest. But I want really where they are today, because actually it really matters. We're talking about the 2020 elections and what we're going to do about this, because the Democrats' number one issue they have is they have to find a superstar vice presidential candidate to run with Biden. They have to have a superstar, because most people are assuming that Biden can't handle, they know he can't handle the job. So the vice president has got to be someone really, really stellar. I'm going to get to the one you're all thinking about in just a moment. But, Biden has floated many names, and other people have kind of stepped up and said, I want to be Joe Biden's vice president. all sorts of people who are not palatable, not workable, not reasonable choices for him to make. But we did have one woman, and I wanted to mention her name because she has kind of risen to the fore just in the last few days, talking about a woman named Karen Bass. And this is a woman, she's a California rep. Karen Bass, she's a Black woman. She is viewed to be very articulate and very well-grounded. People think she's, she would be palatable to a wide swath of voters in this country. Biden desperately wants to have a woman, and preferably a Black woman, for some reason. And again, I thought he picked Kamala Harris, but apparently she's not okay with him. Stacey Abrams wants the job, but Biden wouldn't think of having her. But this Karen Bass got a lot of headway, a lot of headlines recently talking about, her as a potential for the vice presidential race. And so stories, naturally, the media digs in and checks out who she is, what she's all about, because most people hadn't heard of her. She's considered a top contender as for Biden's running mate, and she has a close and ongoing connection with the Nation of Islam. The Louis Farrakhan run, Jew-hating, America-hating Nation of Islam leader, Louis Farrakhan. Louis Farrakhan, a controversial figure for decades, Nation of Islam, proudly anti-Semitic, proudly hates Jewish people, hates white people. She's got a close affiliation with him. So she has her picture taken with him. She goes to their conferences. She stands there. She smiles, gets her picture taken. And now she's trying to say, and I don't really think too much about that. That's not really me. So it's a tough thing because this was someone they thought might be palatable, be workable, acceptable, fly better for American voters than Kamala Harris. I know a lot of you are hearing, and I want to briefly address about Biden and the vice presidential pick. A lot of people are floating the idea that what the Democrats are going to do is at the last minute put in Michelle Obama as the vice presidential pick. I will tell you, if they could arm twist her to do it, she would be a formidable opponent for President Trump, because the Obama mystique, much as conservatives deplore what President Obama did to this country for 8 years, conservatives deplore what that man did to our federal government by weaponizing our federal agencies against the American people, abandoning America by going along with the Iranian deal and essentially funding and arming the most violent, terrorist-inducing, terror-exporting country in the world, Iran. And you had President Obama enter the Iranian deal, which enabled the Iranians to develop nuclear weapons, exactly the opposite of the supposed reason. So I'm getting around to, there's a presumption on the conservative side that if Biden picks Michelle Obama, boy, are we in trouble. But I want to disabuse you of that a little bit. I don't think our side should be saying, hey, yeah, we had Michelle, we had everything was going along swimmingly, but then Biden chose Michelle Obama, so we might as well give up. I want to remind you, everything we now know about Barack Obama, America knows about Barack Obama, and it's part of who Michelle Obama is. Everything uncovered about the Obama presidency, the weaponizing of the American government against its own people, Michelle Obama has to own that or denounce it. But even more importantly, and why I really want to talk about this today, is Michelle Obama is in no position. If she were the vice presidential pick, she cannot denounce the violence, the massive riots, the mobs, the thuggery, the arson, the murder that's being carried out by the Marxist Black Lives Matter and by Antifa. She can't say a word. Our side's going to be talking a lot about that, and should be, about how we cannot in this country, we cannot continue to humor, enable, support. We cannot allow this violence to continue. Michelle Obama is going to have to defend it. If she were the vice presidential candidate, she has to defend it. She has no other choice, especially not just because she's Black, but in part because she's Black, and in part because the Democrat Party has been completely enabling, allowing, tolerating, not cracking down on the violence on the streets in America. And so that is a huge strike against Michelle Obama. I also think in this country that once the American people saw the great good that came from the Trump policies when he became president, and we actually began securing our border, we actually began bringing jobs back to America. We got rid of horrible trade deals with China and other countries, which resulted in jobs coming back to America. All of that is part of the mix that the American people will look at in the 2020 cycle, that we brought jobs back, that President Trump brought the lowest unemployment numbers for every conceivable category of American ever. And so I really think there's an important side not to get down some really fearful path that says, well, if it turns out that somehow Biden arm twist coerces or whatever Michelle Obama to become his vice presidential candidate, that we should throw up our hands and just decide we're lost. No way. The American people want what they found under President Trump for the first 3 years of his presidency. They want that security at the border. They want trade deals that make it safe and they make it productive for America to trade again. They want jobs to come back to America. That's what the American people want. And we need to not have some kind of throw our hands up and surrender if Biden somehow arm twists Obama or Michelle Obama into becoming his vice president. But I do realize that rumors out there. And I mean, she has said many times, I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. I will say the Democrat Party, though, is desperate. They're desperate because they see a Trump. And by the way, I'm going to share these numbers in a moment. But Trump's polling is back up. He's back at 51% approval rating. And then so Trump is, he was dealt a really raw deal on the whole coronavirus thing. Things were going on in America quite swimmingly, really well, until we had the coronavirus hit earlier this year. And obviously everything has fallen apart. But I think the American people want what Trump is offering. And I make that case. I also think this ties back to our first segment. I want to talk about it more a little later in this show, but this whole idea of how the entire effort of the Fauci, the Democrat media mob and the left to keep the coronavirus propped up as a scary thing, to not allow Americans access to treatments that are effective. This is all part and parcel of the effort to have the election steered toward Biden because they can unfairly blame Trump for the coronavirus and the way the death numbers on the coronavirus and the resulting harm to our economy. That was a long ramble, but the first point I want to get on Biden is his vice presidential pick is huge. If Michelle Obama does say no, there's not anybody else in the cards, no one even in the works who would have the power and impact and draw that Michelle Obama has. And the entire Democrat Party knows that. The entire party understands that. There's nothing like her in terms of a draw. And they know his VP pick really, really matters. Okay, so Karen Bass, I think she's already out. He cannot bring her along with her Nation of Islam friendliness. Okay, next thing I wanted to hit was about the idea of the before the fall elections is the idea of the debates. What is going to happen with the presidential debates? And for many Americans who pay attention to politics, I mean, it's a funny thing. Diehard Democrat or you're a diehard Republican, you might enjoy the debates, you might watch them out of interest, but you don't think it's going to sway your vote. And so we, the activists on either side, can kind of forget that there is actually a wide swath of Americans who actually are independent or who actually are, just not that tuned into politics. And so they kind of wait each time. And they do actually want to see debates. They want to see the candidates who want to be president stand up in front of the American people and talk about the issues that matter. And the Democrat Party is fully aware that Joe Biden cannot handle debates. He would be chewed up and spit out in the first debate by President Trump, who maintains enormous mental acuity, is on top of all sorts of issues, happy to debate, ready to debate them. Democrats are in a pickle of what to do about debates, waiting to see if the debates will come along. So what has happened is you're starting to see this whole avalanche of media attention, avalanche of players on the American left who are coming out saying, we don't need debates. That's ridiculous. Why do we have to have debates? And they're even trying to make it sound like they're giving insider advice to Biden, that Biden, he's really hankering to debate. Don't you doubt it. He really wants a debate, but that he has to be convinced by these experts that he doesn't need to do that. But I wanted to share some of those with you. Bill Clinton's press secretary, Joe Lockhart, was on CNN, and he urged, this is Bill Clinton, press secretary, encouraged Biden to skip the debates. In a CNN interview, he said he should skip the debates. And this is actually after he already published a piece urging him also to skip the debates. And he was basically saying his idiotic reason was, well, everyone knows that President Trump is a liar. So why should you debate with a liar? You don't have to debate with a liar. How are you going to do that? Don't even give him an opportunity to get up there and lie, which is the dumbest argument in the world, because if it were true that Trump was a big liar, which he is not, but if it were true, then you'd be hankering for a debate. You say, yeah, I'm going to debate him. I'm going to get up there and I'm going to point out he lies. I'm going to raise my hand and say, lie, 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 lie. That's what you would do. You would want the debate. But Lockhart's looking for a reason to excuse Biden not debating. That was one example. New York Times published an op-ed urging the cancellation of this year's presidential debates. Newsweek published a piece claiming there's a rising number of Americans, probably from 1 to 2, but whatever, Americans, who support the idea that Biden should just skip the debates. Bill Kristol, former conservative, now insane Democrat, has urged the debates be canceled. A former senior advisor to Hillary Clinton, Zach Petraeus, said Biden shouldn't feel, get this line, Biden shouldn't feel obligated to throw Trump a lifeline by granting him any debates at all. This isn't a normal presidential election and Trump is not a legitimate candidate. So he's arguing that because it's a not normal election year, which, I mean, if anything was ever not a normal year, this is it, but still not a normal election year. And you shouldn't be throwing Trump a lifeline. I mean, Trump doesn't need a lifeline from Biden or anybody else. This is the left hysterically trying to come up with some rational rationale for urging Biden to skip the debates. And then there's also, there was one last urging of skipping the debates, and I don't want to belabor this. The point is, there are usually many debates, and right now the way the debate schedule is set, just so you know, the debate set is scheduled now. The schedule is that the first one would be September, I don't know what it is, 29th or something like that. And that is in a date after 4 states have already begun early voting. That's another whole problem in this country, but not 4 states have gone with early voting, have early voting that will be happening before the first debate. So, I mean, I guess in those states you could say, well, they're not forced to vote early. If they're undecided, I guess they won't. But the idea of putting debates off, you already have, I think it was Notre Dame, decided they were not going to host debates they previously agreed to host, but there are 3 now set. And you have the Trump team urging more. The new Trump campaign manager, Bill Stepien, was talking away on media, just saying, hey, we'd like to have more debates. We want them sooner. We want to get out there and debate, because Republicans recognize one debate will help the American people recognize Joe Biden cannot function and he can't be president. This is why the Democrats don't want to have any debates at all. But so you have a whole debate conundrum, and you see the sharks in the water, or whatever you want to call them, the Democrat media mob circling, just finding a reason, floating reasons that Biden can use to explain why he's not going to debate. And on that subject, by the way, about the debates, the other thing that's very interesting, I'm going to get to mail-in ballots, a whole other major league fiasco. But on the subject of the popularity of the candidates, so Republican enthusiasm for President Trump, his support numbers, his poll numbers with Republican voters who voted for him last time, remain consistent. Massive majority of Trump voters previously who voted for him last time are gung-ho, can't wait. But it's not just that they will vote for him. It is the difference in the enthusiasm factor. And this is huge, because why the enthusiasm factor matters, if you are a half baked. Yeah, I kind of like so and so. Yeah, I guess I'll vote for him. If you get to election day and it's raining out or it's cold or it's a snowstorm or you have a sore throat, whatever, I'm not going to bother. But the enthusiasm factor for Trump voters is huge and much bigger. Okay, so I'll just give you a few numbers. 42% of Trump supporters polled, 42% of Trump supporters polled describe themselves as excited heading into the election. Only 31% of Biden supporters say the same thing. So Trump supporters can't wait to have his election. Biden supporters, kind of meh, but all sorts of other great ideas, great numbers for Trump. Just saying, basically, his supporters, they want the Trump agenda. They want strong America. They want America first. They want to have strong borders. They want to have a free market system. They want to reject the rising socialism. They want to have a strong military. They want to stand up against the massive illegal immigration. They want to have reformed immigration system that protects the American worker. They want all sorts of things on the Trump agenda. And the Democrats, really the main thing motivating most Democrats who are talking about Biden is not because they think he's great. It's because they are anti-Trumpers. So the Democrats kind of have to run this whole campaign on an anti-Trump. Vote for us, we're not Trump is about the best slogan Biden could come up with. Vote for me, I'm not Trump. But I want to go one other huge factor coming out of the basement, and that is this. The push for mail-in ballots in this country is huge on the left. The left is pushing mail-in ballots, and the reason is because they are a complete playground for a toy store full of potential mischief for Democrat fraud voters, for the fraud the Democrats can engage in trying to get this election won by Joe Biden. That's the Democrats support mail-in ballots because mail-in ballots are the best way to commit fraud. I want to give you just two examples. And we've had in the show before Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation extensively about this. I just saw last night he has two new pieces up. He's coming on the show tomorrow, I think. So maybe we'll talk about that too with him. But there's massive evidence of the potential for fraud in mail-in ballots. But one thing I want to float for you, so in the state of Nevada, the Democrat-controlled legislature in the state of Nevada, desperate to be sure Nevada goes with Biden and doesn't go with Trump. They had a dark of the night passage of new election laws in the state of Nevada. So as a result of what they passed in Nevada, the way it works now, talk about mail-in ballot, playground for fraud. In Nevada now, if this law is not challenged, you can enter a nursing home. You don't have to be related to the person you're working with, the person whose vote you're allegedly going to collect. You can go to a nursing home, a perfectly healthy person, go to a nursing home with an absentee ballot, fill in the ballot, and for somebody, you don't have to be related to him, you don't have to claim you know him, but you're allowed to get the votes of these dementia patients without their signature. No signature required. So imagine the fraud going into nursing home, especially one, also run by Democrats. You show up there, you have a lot of dementia patients, and so you can have, but they're citizens of Nevada, and they might have registered to vote at some point. You can vote their ballot. You don't have to be related to them. You don't have to know them. You don't have to have their signature, and you vote their ballot, and off it goes as a mail-in ballot. This is the kind of skullduggery that the Democrats will engage in around this country if we go to all mail-in ballots. And I'll be clear, I think mail-in ballots have a place. We should have mail-in ballots for the military, the diplomats serving our country around the world, people serving America around the world, the truly bedridden, the truly disabled. I'm not against all mail-in ballots, but the standard should be everybody votes in person unless you have a clear, specific reason why you can't. And I know this is a matter of state law, and I know some states have had all mail-in ballots for a long time. But I'll tell you another example. This is just one example of laws that could change in Democrat states. So now you're going to have in Nevada people voting for dementia patients What could go wrong with that? In the state of New York, they had a primary back on June 23rd, a primary on June 23rd. And just yesterday, a judge, a federal court judge, had to order election officials in the state of New York to count the mail-in ballots. Okay, we're way past June 23rd, to be clear. We're in August. Finally got to a federal court judge. But what happened was a lot of the ballots, mail-in ballots, came in. And obviously, mail-in means you go through the U.S. Postal Service. So people sent in mail-in ballots, and there was no date stamp on them. It's not the voter's fault. That voter is not the one who puts the post office date stamp. The post office is supposed to do that. But some postal box, I think in Brooklyn, basically didn't stamp any of these mail-in ballots. They didn't have a date stamp, so they counted. And that's just one little example. Please, absorb this point. People complain about the Postal Service all the time. People have a story, but yeah, I mailed my cousin, my wedding invitation. It was 2 years ago. She just got it yesterday. Things get lost in the mail. We have stories all over this country, mail carriers who, for whatever reason, don't like their job. We had a story in Texas where we had a whole pile of mail that was supposed to have been carried and delivered by a particular carrier found in a trash dump. If you have mail-in ballots at a massive level, you're talking about millions and millions of new pieces of U.S. mail that the left is pushing. The left wants mail-in ballots available in every state, and not just subject to people who are in the military or diplomats or disabled or some other reason. They want to have mail-in ballots as widely available as possible, which means they will have millions and millions and millions of new pieces of mail, higher than the average pieces of mail, in a system already cumbersome and not impressive. And then anything like this story in New York where the post office just didn't date stamp, a whole pile of mail-in ballots didn't get counted. Having your vote subject to the whim, irresponsibility, mistake of the U.S. Postal Service, compounded by millions and millions and millions of voters, compounded by the propensity and the playground level ability of leftists to contort the use of mail-in ballots, to abuse them, to mail-in ballots. We had this in California. We talked about, I can't remember, this was 2016, several years ago, where you had the mail-in ballots that turned up in, I think it was 5 congressional districts in California, and the Republican and conservative areas, and the Republican won the election on election night based on the ballots cast. And then after all the mail-in ballots, later discovered, or ballots not yet counted, all counted, and all seats flipped to the Democrat. You have to understand the Democrats are desperate to get rid of President Trump. It is why they engaged in the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. It is why they tried to impeach him for what Joe Biden did. It is why they hammer on him daily about everything he does. The Democrats want President Trump out of office more than they want life itself. And it's not because of his tweets, and it's not because they think he has an abrasive personality, or they don't like him, or they don't like his hairstyle. It is because President Trump has stopped the Democrat tracks in turning this country over the socialist cliff. Barack Obama almost had us there, very, very close. And you have the Democrats hysterical about getting Trump out of office because they want their radical leftist agenda, and Trump is the boulder in the road standing in the way. They will do anything to get him out, including someone who has advanced dementia, can't handle debates, can't handle a conversation, can't serve as president, but they just get this guy with a D next to his name over the time, whatever it takes, including mail-in ballot fraud, massive fraud. They don't care. The goal is to get the Democrat elected. And the only people standing in the way of that mission of the Democrat Party are President Trump and his supporters, people who push back in every state. They try to pull mail-in ballot garbage in your state. if it's not already law in your state, watch what your state government is doing. Challenge your state government if they are doing this kind of, well, got to move toward mail-in ballots, got to move toward an extended voting season. People, and I want to go back and talk about how COVID is playing into all this, and Fauci's just unbelievable. I don't even know what to call it, what polite word I can call it, but Fauci's mission to make sure that we do not have a cure for COVID, which is what Fauci's mission is. If we have a cure for COVID and hydroxychloroquine works and everybody's healthy, or people are getting healthy and they're not fearful and they're going back to work and America is functioning as normal, then there's no justification for the mail-in ballot hysteria, no justification for massively extending the. This is how COVID ties in to the election. There's a determination by the left to make sure COVID stays a crisis, because the economy stays a crisis. And if the economy is a crisis, then Trump doesn't do as well as he did when the economy was good. And if you have COVID remain in place, you have alleged necessity for mail-in. All of this is being manipulated to work against President Trump in the 2020 elections. And this, my friends, is why we must stand up against the effort to expand mail-in ballots, the effort to expand vote, and we must demand hydroxychloroquine considered a legitimate treatment in this country for COVID-19.